The cry in the rain fell hard on the alien marketplace, turning the ground into rivers of mud. Shadows stretched under the dim street lamps, and every stall was dripping water from its roof. Daniel pulled his jacket tighter, his boots splashing as he walked. He had come here to trade spare ship parts, nothing more. This was just another stop, another wet and noisy city on a distant world. But something in the air felt different tonight. The storm didn't just carry water. It carried fear. Through the sound of rain and the loud calls of sailors, Daniel heard a different sound, a cry, faint but filled with desperation. He turned his head, trying to find where it came from. At first, he thought it was just the wind moving through the alleys, but then he heard it again, sharper this time, almost breaking. It was a woman's voice, trembling and desperate. "Please, someone, help her." Daniel followed the sound between two rows of stalls. The path narrowed, lined with crates, torn cloth, and puddles of dirty water. At the far end, near a broken wooden bench, he saw her, an alien woman kneeling in the mud, her arms wrapped tightly around a small figure. Her skin was pale green, her long hair soaked and clinging to her cheeks. Her eyes were wild, scanning the crowd as people passed without stopping. Some glanced at her, but quickly turned away. Others muttered under their breath, spitting in the mud as they passed. Daniel stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The woman looked up sharply, as if surprised someone had spoken to her. Her lips trembled, and she clutched the child tighter. "My baby. She won't wake up," she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel's gaze dropped to the small bundle in her arms. It was a child, maybe 3 years old, limp, her breathing shallow. Her skin was dull, almost gray. Daniel knelt beside them, ignoring the cold mud soaking through his pants. "Had she been like this long?" he asked. "Since last night," the mother replied, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "She just stopped moving. She's all I have left." Her words hit him harder than the storm wind. Daniel checked the child's pulse. Faint. But there, the girl's chest rose and fell. But barely. "She needs help. Now," he said firmly. He moved to lift the child from her arms. But before he could, a deep voice called out, "Stop." Daniel turned to see a large alien guard blocking the way. The guard's armor was dull silver, rain sliding off it like oil. In his hand was a long spear-like weapon, glowing at the tip. "No outsider touches the sick," the guard growled. Daniel frowned. "She's dying. I can help." The guard shook his head. "You'll spread the curse to the rest of the market." He jabbed the weapon toward them, forcing Daniel to step back. The mother pleaded, "Please, he's the only one who stopped, the only one who cares." But the guard only laughed coldly. "Then you'll both die together in the rain." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of cruelty before, fear used as an excuse to abandon the weak. He glanced at the mother, her arms trembling from holding the child. Then he looked at the guard, standing tall and smug. The choice wasn't hard. Daniel suddenly stepped forward, swinging his shoulder into the guard's chest. The guard stumbled back with a grunt, slipping on the wet ground. "Run!" Daniel shouted to the mother. She hesitated for a second, shocked. Then she gathered her child close and started running, her bare feet splashing through the mud. Daniel followed, the sounds of shouting rising behind them. Other guards were being called, voices echoing in the storm. The market that had seemed so busy a moment ago now felt like a trap. Every alley was crowded, every stall owner glaring at them as they passed. The mother stumbled, almost falling, but Daniel caught her arm and pulled her up. "Don't stop," he urged. They slipped between two tall cargo crates, their bodies pressed close to avoid being seen. Daniel could hear the heavy boots of the guards splashing somewhere nearby. The mother was breathing hard, her hair sticking to her wet face. The child made no sound, her small head resting against her mother's shoulder. They darted into another alley, the wind howling as the storm worsened. Daniel's mind raced. His ship wasn't far. But the guards were closing in. If they didn't reach it soon, there would be no chance to save the little girl. A bolt of lightning lit up the sky, and for a split second, he saw their path. He pointed ahead. This way. The mother nodded, clutching her child even tighter. The rain pounded down, washing away footprints, but also making every step slippery. Daniel's heart pounded, not just from the run, but from the fear that they were already too late, somewhere behind them. A whistle cut through the storm, a signal. The hunt had begun. Daniel glanced back. Seeing shadows moving fast, he pushed forward, refusing to let the night end here. The mother's voice cracked, as she whispered, "Please, don't let her die." Daniel didn't look back, but his voice was steady. "Not while I'm still breathing." Rain poured like a waterfall from the sky, soaking every street of the alien marketplace. Daniel and the mother ran through the narrow paths, splashing mud and water with each step. The small child lay limp in her mother's arms, her head bobbing with every jolt. Daniel's eyes darted around, looking for the fastest way to his ship. But the market was alive with movement, and not in a friendly way. Voices shouted from all directions, calling for guards. Metal boots clanged against the wet cobblestones, growing louder. They were being hunted. Daniel grabbed the mother's arm and pulled her into a shadowed alley between two tall buildings. The smell of wet stone and rotting fruit filled the air. The mother's breath came in quick bursts, her face pale from fear and exhaustion. Daniel peered out from the corner, watching the patrols. He counted 6 guards in silver armor, spears glowing faintly at their tips. They moved methodically, scanning the streets for any sign of them. The mother clutched her child closer, her lips trembling. "They won't stop," she whispered. "The law says outsiders can't interfere with the cursed." Daniel frowned. "Cursed?" She nodded, eyes wet with both rain and tears. "That's what they call those who fall into the sleeping sickness. The ones who don't wake." Daniel clenched his fists. "So they just let them die?" he asked, his voice tight with anger. The mother lowered her gaze. "Yes. They say the sickness brings bad luck, that it spreads misfortune." Her voice broke. "No one will help us. Not even our own neighbors." A flash of lightning illuminated the alley, casting their shadows. Long and thin, Daniel's mind worked quickly. The market was too crowded, and the main street would be blocked. He needed another way, a hidden path to the docks. But every second they stayed here, the child's breathing grew weaker. Suddenly, a tall figure stepped into the alley entrance. It was another guard, his armor heavier, a captain by the looks of it. His sharp eyes caught sight of them instantly. "You there?" "Stop," he barked, his voice echoing through the rain. The mother flinched, holding the child tighter. Daniel didn't waste time. He pushed her behind him and stepped forward. The guard raised his spear, the glowing tip aimed directly at Daniel's chest. "Put the child down and walk away." "Outsider," the guard ordered. Daniel's voice was cold. "She's sick. She needs help." "Help?" The guard scoffed. "There is no help for the cursed, only the peace of death." The mother whimpered at his words. Daniel took a slow breath, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not asking for permission," he said. Then, in a blur, he grabbed the spear shaft and shoved it upward. The guard stumbled back, water splashing around his boots. Daniel shoved the weapon aside and grabbed the mother's hand. "Run," he shouted again. They dashed down the alley, the guard's angry shout following them. After them. The rain came harder now, pelting their faces. Daniel's boots slipped on the slick stones, but he didn't slow down. The mother's bare feet slapped against the ground, splashing mud up her legs. The child remained silent, her small body frighteningly still. Daniel spotted an archway ahead that led behind the market stalls. They ducked through it, finding themselves in a maze of storage sheds and covered carts. The air here was heavy with the smell of wet grain and oil. The sound of the market faded slightly, replaced by the steady drum of rain on tin roofs. The mother clutched her child to her chest, her voice shaking. "They'll kill you for this, and they'll kill her anyway if we're caught." Daniel's eyes burned with determination. "Then we don't get caught," he replied. He scanned the path ahead and spotted a narrow bridge that crossed over to the dockside area, but two guards stood at the far end, spears in hand. Daniel looked around quickly, spotting a stack of wooden crates beside them. If they could create a distraction, maybe they could slip past. He crouched low beside the mother, speaking quietly. "When I say go, you run. Don't look back." Her eyes widened. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you," he assured her. Though his tone left little room for doubt, Daniel moved silently toward the crates. Pulling a small device from his belt, it was a flare, bright, loud, and perfect for confusion. He set it between the crates and twisted the ignition. A burst of blinding light and crackling sparks erupted. The guards shouted in surprise, turning toward the noise. "Go!" Daniel yelled. The mother sprinted across the bridge, her feet slipping on the wet wood. Daniel followed close behind, glancing over his shoulder. The guards were shouting orders, but the flare's glare kept them disoriented. They reached the other side and ducked into another alley. The sound of the river docks was close now, waves splashing, ropes creaking. Daniel's heart pounded with urgency. They were almost there, but the marketplace's cruel law had made their escape dangerous from the start. He knew that if they were caught, mercy would not be an option. The mother stumbled, but caught herself. Still clutching the child, Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "We're close," he said, his voice low but confident. She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounded. The signal that the docks were being closed. Daniel's jaw tightened. Time was running out. And the storm showed no sign of mercy. Neither did the people chasing them. The wind howled through the narrow dockside alleys, carrying the scent of salt and rust. Rain hammered down like 1,000 small stones, stinging Daniel's face as he pushed forward. The mother was just ahead of him, clutching her child as if the smallest loosened grip would take her away forever. Her bare feet slipped on the wet boards, but she never stopped. Behind them, the sound of boots on wood echoed. The guards had crossed the bridge, their shouts carried through the storm, angry and sharp. Daniel knew they had only moments before they were caught. The dock stretched ahead, long and lined with old wooden warehouses. Some doors hung open, revealing stacks of cargo crates and fishing nets. Daniel scanned the path quickly. His ship was docked 3 piers over, but reaching it meant crossing open ground where the guards could easily see them. He caught up to the mother and pulled her into the shadows between 2 warehouses. She was panting, her face pale under the glow of the dock lamps. Daniel leaned close so his voice could be heard over the rain. "We need to move fast, but quiet," he said. The mother nodded, her arms tightening protectively around the child. They slipped along the side of the warehouse, keeping low. The sound of the storm was loud enough to hide most of their movements, but every creak of the dock's wooden planks made Daniel tense. Somewhere nearby, a guard's voice barked orders. "Check every pier. They can't have gone far." Daniel's heart beat hard, not from fear for himself, but for the small girl whose shallow breaths he could hear. The sickness was stealing her time, and every minute lost was another chance they might lose her completely. The mother stumbled slightly, and Daniel caught her before she fell. Her eyes glistened with tears that mixed with the rain. "She's getting colder," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel's jaw tightened. He could feel the urgency clawing at him. He pulled a small thermal cloth from his belt pouch and wrapped it around the child. The girl's tiny face was pale, but the warmth brought the faintest twitch to her lips. It was enough to remind Daniel why he couldn't slow down. They reached the edge of the warehouse and peeked around the corner. The open pier lay ahead, lit by a line of flickering lamps. Beyond it, the dark shape of Daniel's ship rocked gently in the water. The docking ramp was down, rain pooling at its base, but between them and the ship stood 2 guards. Each wore heavy armor and carried those glowing spears Daniel had seen earlier. They were scanning the docks carefully, their eyes sharp. Daniel's mind worked quickly. There was no time for a careful plan. He turned to the mother, his voice urgent. When I move, run straight to the ramp, don't stop, no matter what. Her eyes widened. What if they won't touch you if I'm in the way? Daniel said firmly. Without another word, he stepped into the open, moving with steady, deliberate strides. The guards noticed him instantly, weapons rising. Stop. Identify yourself. One of them shouted. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he sprinted toward them, splashing water across the dock. The first guard lunged with his spear, but Daniel twisted aside. The tip glanced off his shoulder armor, sending a jolt of heat through him. He grabbed the shaft and yanked hard, pulling the guard off balance. The second guard stepped forward to strike, but Daniel kicked a loose crate into his path. It smashed into the guard's knees, making him stumble. Go now, Daniel roared over the storm. The mother ran, her feet pounding against the dock. The child's head rested against her chest, unmoving but still breathing. Daniel shoved the first guard back and blocked a strike from the second. Rain blinded him for a moment, but he didn't care. All that mattered was keeping their path clear. The mother reached the ramp and hurried up, slipping once, but catching herself before she fell. She disappeared into the ship's entryway, her silhouette swallowed by the dim interior lights. Daniel took a step back toward the ramp, but the guards weren't letting him go easily. One swung the spear low, forcing Daniel to leap aside. The other tried to tackle him, but Daniel ducked, using the guard's momentum to send him sliding across the wet boards. Daniel ran for the ramp, boots pounding. Another shout rang out behind him as more guards arrived at the far end of the pier. He dashed up the ramp and slammed the control panel. With a hiss of hydraulics, the ramp began to lift. The ship's engines hummed to life, vibrating through the metal floor. Daniel turned to see the mother standing just inside the medbay door. Her hair was plastered to her face, her arms still wrapped protectively around the child. She looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. Please, she whispered, don't let her slip away. Daniel gave a small nod and stepped toward them. But outside, through the rising ramp, he saw the silhouettes of more guards running toward the ship. They were too late now. The engines roared, and the vessel lifted from the dock, rising into the stormy sky. Inside, the storm's noise faded to a dull rumble, but the urgency in the air remained heavy. Daniel's gaze went to the small girl again, her breaths shallow and uneven. He knew the journey to safety had only just begun, and the real fight, the one against time, was only starting. The medbay lights flickered softly, casting a pale glow across the walls. Daniel guided the mother inside, shutting the door behind them as the ship's engine steadied. Outside, the storm still raged, but here the air felt heavier for a different reason. The mother laid her child gently on the medical bed, her hands trembling as she pulled the thermal cloth tighter around the girl. Daniel moved quickly to the control panel, activating the scanner above the bed. A thin blue beam swept over the child's small body, humming quietly. Numbers and readings flashed on the screen, each one worse than the last. The mother hovered near, her eyes locked on the machine, as if it could somehow give her hope. Daniel leaned closer to the display, reading the results with a tightening jaw. The girl's heart rate was dangerously low, her temperature dropping. And there was a strange reading, something attacking the nervous system. He didn't recognize the exact pathogen, but he knew one thing: it was moving fast. Can you help her? The mother asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Daniel met her eyes. I can try, he said, but I'll need to act now. He reached into the cabinet beside the bed and pulled out a small injector. Inside was a clear, faintly glowing, liquid, human-made emergency stim. It was meant for soldiers in critical condition, designed to jolt the heart and boost the body's fight against collapse. But it was made for humans, not for her species. Daniel's hand hovered over the injector, hesitating for a moment. The mother's eyes filled with tears. If there's even a chance. Do it, she said, her voice shaking, but steady with resolve. Daniel nodded, sliding the injector gently against the child's neck. With a soft hiss, The liquid entered her system. For a moment, nothing happened. The mother gripped the edge of the bed, her knuckles white. Then, the girl's chest rose a little higher, her breathing slightly stronger. It wasn't much, but it was something. The mother let out a trembling breath, tears slipping down her cheeks. "She's still here," she whispered, brushing wet hair from the girl's forehead. Daniel adjusted the bed's heating unit, wrapping the thermal cloth around the child more snugly. He monitored her pulse on the screen, watching for any sign of sudden change. The heartbeat was still weak, but steady enough for now. The mother stood in silence, staring down at her daughter, as if willing her to stay alive. Daniel could see the exhaustion in her eyes, not just from the run through the storm, but from years of struggle. He didn't need to ask to know she had been alone for a long time. After a moment, the ship's comm system crackled. A voice from the port authority barked through the static, demanding identification. Daniel muted the line without answering. He couldn't risk letting anyone know he had taken someone cursed aboard. Instead, he shifted the ship's heading, aiming for deep space. The mother looked up, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they can't follow," Daniel replied. "And somewhere she might get real treatment." The medbay was quiet, except for the hum of the machines and the soft sound of rain still dripping from their clothes. The mother finally spoke again, her voice low. "They would have left her in the mud, just like they left my mate when he got sick." Daniel's brow furrowed. She continued, "They call it kindness. They say letting the cursed die is mercy, but it's just fear." Her voice hardened. "And fear kills faster than any sickness." Daniel didn't argue. He had seen fear destroy worlds. The girl stirred faintly, her small fingers twitching against the blanket. The mother gasped softly, taking her daughter's hand in both of hers. Daniel checked the monitors. The readings had improved, but only slightly. "She's fighting," he said quietly. The mother's lips curved into the faintest smile. "She gets that from me," she murmured, leaning down to press her forehead gently to the girl's. A sudden jolt shook the ship, pulling Daniel's attention to the console. An alert flashed red. A patrol craft was tailing them. Daniel cursed under his breath. "They must have locked onto our heat trail," he said, moving toward the cockpit. The mother's eyes widened with fear. "Will they take her?" she asked. "Not while I'm breathing," Daniel replied, his voice like steel. He adjusted the ship's trajectory, diving into the thickest part of the storm clouds, still lingering above the planet. The vessel shook violently, rain and lightning surrounding them. In the medbay, the mother clung to the bed to keep her balance. Daniel's hands worked the controls, guiding the ship through turbulence that would make most pilots freeze. Finally, after a tense minute, the radar showed the patrol craft dropping back. Daniel exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough to think clearly again. He returned to the medbay, kneeling beside the bed. The girl's pulse was holding, but her body was still fragile. "She'll make it through the night," Daniel said, though his eyes warned it would take more than that to save her. The mother reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "I don't know why you stopped for us, but thank you," she whispered. Daniel didn't reply right away. Instead, he glanced at the little girl, and then back at her. "Because someone should have," he finally said, his voice quiet but certain. The hum of the engines filled the silence that followed. Outside, the storm was fading behind them. But Daniel knew the real danger still lay ahead, finding a cure before the fragile pulse in that small body faded forever. The storm faded into darkness as Daniel's ship broke through the upper atmosphere. Clouds and lightning vanished below, replaced by the cold, endless stretch of space. Stars shimmered in the blackness. Distant and silent, Daniel's hands rested firmly on the controls as the ship drifted away from the planet beside him. The hum of the engines was steady, a constant heartbeat in the quiet. But behind that steady sound, there was another heartbeat, small, fragile, and fighting to keep going. In the medbay, the mother sat beside her daughter. Her hands never left the girl's, as if her touch alone could keep her alive. The child's breathing was slow, each inhale shallow but present. Daniel stepped inside quietly, his boots making only the softest thud on the floor. "She's stable for now," he said, his voice low so as not to startle her. The mother looked up, her eyes still red from crying. "But stable isn't the same as safe," Daniel added. Glancing at the monitor's weak readings, she nodded, slowly, brushing the damp hair from the child's forehead. "What do we do now?" she asked. Daniel pulled a small holographic map from his pocket, the stars shifting above his palm. "There's a station on the far edge of the Karthos belt," he said. "They have human tech there, better med bays, better supplies." Her brow furrowed. "Far edge? That's days away." Daniel met her gaze. "We'll make it." He didn't add the part about the dangers in that region, smugglers, pirates, and patrols from worlds that didn't take kindly to strangers. The ship's console beeped softly. Daniel moved to check it, scanning the incoming data. A faint energy signature was on their trail. Too small for a warship, but too fast for a civilian craft. He narrowed his eyes. "We've got company," he muttered. The mother stiffened, her hands tightening on the child's. "Will they take us back?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not if I keep us ahead." He returned to the cockpit, fingers flying across the controls. The ship angled toward the dark stretches between the stars. Here, there was no light but the faint glow from distant suns. It was a place where sensors sometimes failed and ships vanished without a trace. Daniel used it as cover, weaving through pockets of asteroid dust and debris left from old battles. The pursuing craft's signal flickered on his radar, sometimes vanishing, sometimes reappearing. They were persistent. Whoever they were, back in the medbay, the girl stirred slightly. Her lips moved as if she were trying to form words. The mother leaned closer, whispering softly in her own language. Daniel watched from the doorway for a moment. It wasn't just fear in her voice. It was love so deep it made him wonder when she had last felt safe. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "She's dreaming, I think." Daniel stepped inside, checking the readings again. The pulse was still weak, but holding. The ship shuddered suddenly as a streak of light flashed past the viewing screen. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He rushed to the cockpit and saw the pursuing craft had closed the gap, small, fast, and armed, a Hunter-class skimmer. It didn't carry heavy weapons, but enough to cripple a ship if they got close. Daniel cursed under his breath, slamming the throttle forward. The stars outside blurred into streaks as the ship accelerated. The skimmer gave chase, weaving through the void like a predator. Daniel toggled the comm system. "This is the private vessel Solus Break Pursuit," he said. The only reply was static, then a voice that chilled the air. "You have something that belongs to the market." Daniel's grip on the controls tightened. "She's not property," he growled. The voice laughed, cold and amused. "Everything is property to someone," it said, before the line went dead. The mother appeared in the doorway to the cockpit, her face pale, but her eyes fierce. "They won't stop," she said. "None until they have her." Daniel glanced at her, and then at the skimmer drawing closer. "Then we'll make sure they never find her again," he replied. He twisted the ship into a sharp dive toward a dense asteroid field. The skimmer followed, but its pilot hesitated, wary of the shifting rocks. Daniel pushed harder, dodging spinning debris and narrow gaps. Metal groaned around them as the hull scraped past a jagged asteroid edge. Inside the medbay, the girl whimpered softly. The mother returned to her side, stroking her hair. Daniel's voice came through the ship's intercom. "Hold on, we're almost clear." The engines roared as the ship broke through the far side of the asteroid field. The radar showed the skimmer's signal fading, unable to match their maneuver, for the first time since leaving the planet. Daniel allowed himself a small breath of relief. He returned to the medbay, where the mother looked up at him with quiet gratitude. "She's still breathing," she said, as if it were the only thing that mattered. Daniel nodded. "We've got some distance now," But we can't slow down. The mother's eyes softened, though her hands never stopped holding her daughter's. Wherever you take us, I'll follow, she said. Daniel met her gaze, feeling the weight of the unspoken promise. They weren't just running from something, they were running toward a fragile hope. The void stretched ahead, endless and silent. Daniel set the course toward the Karthos belt. It would be days before they reached it, and every hour would matter, because out here, in the emptiness between the stars, time was the one enemy he couldn't fight. The hum of the engines filled the ship, steady and low. Stars drifted past the viewing port like silent witnesses to the race against time. In the med bay, Daniel stood over the small bed, scanning the child's vitals again. The readings were worse, the heartbeat was slowing, and the strange neural infection was spreading faster than before. Daniel's jaw tightened as he tapped the monitor, trying to think. He knew what this meant. The stim had bought them time, but it was running out. The mother sat on the floor beside the bed, holding her daughter's tiny hand. Her eyes were red, not just from crying, but from sleeplessness. She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of hope. You have something else, don't you? She asked quietly. Daniel hesitated, his gaze flicking to the small case locked into the medbay wall. Inside was a vial of advanced nanomed, a rare human-made medicine designed to repair nerve damage. It was powerful, precise, and worth more than most ships, but it had never been tested on her species. Daniel had seen it save lives, and he had seen it end them. When the body rejected it, he walked to the case, unlocking it with a slow press of his thumb. The lid lifted with a soft hiss, revealing the vial. The liquid inside shimmered faintly, catching the medbay light. The mother's breath caught at the sight of it. Will it work? She asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. It might heal her completely, he said, or it could kill her instantly. Her eyes didn't waver. If it's the only chance, then we take it, she said firmly. Daniel stepped closer to the bed, the vial cold in his hand. He set it into the injector, the machine clicking into place. For a moment, he stood still, staring down at the child's small face. Her breathing was shallow, her lips pale. She looked so fragile that even the thought of moving her felt dangerous. The mother reached up and gripped Daniel's wrist. She's strong, she whispered, stronger than they ever thought. Daniel gave the smallest nod, drawing in a steadying breath. The injector pressed gently against the child's neck. A soft hiss filled the air as the nanomed entered her bloodstream. The monitors beeped once, then flatlined for a single, frozen heartbeat. The mother gasped. Leaning forward in panic, Daniel's hands moved quickly, checking the readings. Come on, he muttered under his breath. The monitor beeped again, a faint, slow pulse, then another, stronger. The mother covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She's still with us, she whispered, but it wasn't over yet. The nanomed worked quickly, and sometimes violently. The girl's body tensed, her small fingers curling into fists. Her breathing hitched, then steadied. Daniel kept his eyes locked on the readings, watching the infection markers slowly drop. It was working, but her body was struggling to adapt. Sweat broke out across her tiny forehead, and her skin flushed warm. The mother brushed her damp hair back, murmuring softly in her own language. Daniel adjusted the bed's temperature. Control, keeping her stable. Minutes felt like hours outside the med bay. The ship's alert system beeped. Daniel glanced toward the cockpit, frowning. Something was approaching another vessel. Closing fast, he left the monitor on auto and moved to the controls. The radar showed a large freighter moving toward him. It was unmarked, which usually meant one of two things: smugglers or pirates. Daniel cursed under his breath. He had no time for this. If they tried to board, the medicine's work could be interrupted, and that could mean losing the child. The mother sensed his tension. What is it? She asked. Trouble, Daniel replied simply. He switched the ship to low power mode, letting them drift to appear like a dead vessel. The freighter slowed, scanning them. Daniel's hands hovered over the weapon's controls. He hated fighting, with a patient on board, but if they fired first, he wouldn't hesitate. Back in the med bay, the girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, just for a moment, but enough for the mother to see. Her breath caught in her throat. "Daniel," she called softly but urgently. He turned instantly and saw the girl's tiny hand gripping her mother's finger. It was weak, but it was a grip. The infection levels had dropped further on the monitor. The nanomed was holding a rare smile. Tugged at the corner of Daniel's mouth, the freighter eventually drifted past. Deciding they were not worth the trouble, Daniel exhaled slowly, switching the ship back to full power. He returned to the med bay, crouching beside the bed. "You've got a fighter here," he said quietly to the mother. She smiled faintly, brushing her daughter's cheek. "She gets that from me," she said, echoing her earlier words. Daniel's eyes softened. "Let's just make sure she lives long enough to prove it," he replied. Hours passed in a quiet tension. The infection markers continued to fall, the heartbeat growing stronger. The girl's skin warmed, her breathing steadying. By the time the Carthos belt was visible on the navigation map, Daniel knew they had a real chance. But there was still one thing left to face: the station itself. If they learned who the girl was, or where she came from, they might refuse entry, and if that happened, they would be back to running again. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching the mother hum softly to her child. The sound was gentle, yet it carried a promise not to let go. In that moment, Daniel realized that promise wasn't hers alone anymore. It was his too. The Carthos belt glittered ahead, a sea of drifting rocks and glowing mineral clouds. Daniel's ship slid through the narrow gaps between asteroids, engines humming steady. Beyond the belt, the faint outline of a station came into view. It was old but sturdy, its hull patched with mismatched metals from 100 worlds. Trade ships moved in and out like insects around a hive. Daniel kept the ship's speed slow, trying not to draw attention. In the med bay, the mother sat upright for the first time in days. Her daughter's head rested in her lap, breathing soft, but even the girl's skin had regained a gentle color, and her lips no longer looked so pale. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. The mother froze for a heartbeat, then leaned close. "My little star," she whispered in her own language, tears filling her eyes. The child blinked, looking up at her. Mother before her gaze drifted to Daniel in the doorway. Daniel stepped inside slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey," he said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." The girl tilted her head, as if trying to understand his words. Her tiny hand reached out, and Daniel knelt beside the bed. She gripped his finger with surprising strength. The mother smiled through her tears. "She's never held a stranger's hand before," she said quietly. Daniel's mouth curved into the smallest smile. "I guess I'm not a stranger anymore," he replied. The ship drifted closer to the station, its metal hull catching the light of the nearby sun. Daniel returned to the cockpit, checking the comms. A calm voice from the station requested identification. He sent a fake registry code, an old smuggler's trick, to avoid questions. They accepted it without hesitation, clearing him for docking. Daniel exhaled slowly, feeling the tension begin to ease. But deep down, he knew safety was never permanent. They landed in a quiet docking bay away from the main traffic. Daniel helped the mother gather her few belongings, a small satchel and a folded blanket. She carried her daughter, the girl's arms wrapped loosely around her neck. The docking ramp lowered with a hiss, letting in the station's warm, recycled air. It smelled faintly of oil and metal. To most, it was just another port, but to them, it was a doorway to a future. As they stepped onto the platform, the mother looked around nervously. "This place, will they help us?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "They won't ask questions. Not if I take you to the right people." They walked through the dim corridors, the sound of footsteps echoing on the metal floor. Merchants passed by, glancing at them but saying nothing. Daniel led them to a small, hidden clinic tucked between two supply shops. The door opened with a chime, revealing a human medic behind the counter. The medic's eyes widened when he saw the child. Without a word, he ushered them into a private room. Daniel explained quickly. The sickness, the chase, the nanomed. The medic listened, nodding, then ran a detailed scan. After a tense moment, he smiled faintly. She's out of danger, he said. Her body's adapting perfectly. The mother covered her mouth, sobbing softly in relief. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight on his chest lift just a little. They stayed in the clinic for several hours while the girl rested. The medic provided nutrient packs and a clean change of clothes. The mother changed into a simple tunic, her damp, torn dress finally discarded. The little girl was wrapped in a soft blanket, her eyes following Daniel wherever he moved. At one point, she reached out for him again. He took her small hand, feeling the warmth that had been missing when he first found her. The mother watched, her expression unreadable but soft. Later, as the station lights dimmed for night cycle, Daniel stood by the clinic door. You're safe here, he told the mother. You can stay as long as you need. She stepped closer, her daughter resting sleepily against her shoulder. I don't know how to repay you, she said. Daniel shook his head. You don't have to, but she pressed on, her voice low but certain. You saved her when no one else would. We're your family now, if you'll have us. For a long moment, Daniel didn't speak. He looked at the girl, her small fingers curled against her mother's tunic. Then he looked back at the mother. Family, he repeated softly, as if testing the word. A warmth settled in his chest. Yeah, he said finally, I'll have you. The mother's eyes shone, and the little girl, half asleep, smiled faintly at the sound of his voice. The three of them stood there in the quiet room. The hum of the station all around. Outside, ships came and went. Stars drifted past the windows, and the galaxy carried on, as always. But for them, something had changed. They were no longer just survivors. They were bound together by a choice, by risk, by something stronger than blood. And as Daniel looked at them, he knew he wouldn't let anything tear them apart. In the distance, beyond the station walls, the void stretched on endlessly, but Daniel no longer saw it as empty. Because now, in that vast and dangerous galaxy, he had something worth protecting, and he would guard it for as long as he breathed.